Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We have been discussing part 4 of Dr. Parvez Hoodbhoy's book, this part is titled 5 Big Questions. We have covered 4 questions in our conversation, and now we turn to the 5th question, which is, I am a Pakistani, but what am I? So, Dr. Saab, on the face of it, this is contradictory, because we are asserting I am a Pakistani, but what am I? So what do you mean by it?
Imagine that you were born on the 14th of August 1947. You came into existence just then as the state of Pakistan was formed. Well, what were you before that? An embryo. But your parents and your ancestors, they were from that land. They didn't know what they were. But then all of a sudden, a line is drawn, and whoever is born on this side of the line is then belonging to that particular country, and then presumably acquires a passport, and unless he or she flees that country, becomes a national of that. Now, this is a very important question for Pakistanis, because they need to know who they are. Are they the people who belong to the soil, or are they any Muslim who has migrated there? Now, the whole question of what is a nation is actually a very important one to deal with at the very outset. And in my book, I take as the basic framework that of Benedict Anderson's Imagined Communities. It's a seminal work. It's something that sociologists and anthropologists now use as a means of understanding the meaning of nationhood. What is a nation? It's a group of people which feels that they are tied to each other, which means that they have a common history, they may have a common religion, which may be a part of their feeling together. They may have the same facial features, they may be dark or light, they may have other similarities, physical similarities, similarities in the way of thought as well. But the interesting thing is that if there is a nation, then you don't need to know every person in that nation. And yet you feel that you have a common link with that person who you will never meet in your life. You know, if you ask yourself the question, how many individuals do you encounter in a typical lifetime, and whose names you can remember? What would be your guess? 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, not more than that. And yet an Italian will say that, yes, I belong to Italy, and I don't need to know every one of them. I have a sort of a linkage with them, and that linkage is because of language, of culture, etc., etc. So this is something that is there in the minds of people. The very important thing to understand is that a nation is an imagined community, just like the square root of -1 is an imagined number. It exists only in your mind. So that is where one must start when asking the question, what am I? If I'm a Pakistani, what does that mean? Is it enough to have a green passport? Is it enough to have a national identity card which says Pakistan on it? Well, we are told that you are part of the Pakistani nation because you're a Muslim, because that is the notion on which Pakistan was founded, was formed. But then where does this leave everybody else who is not a Muslim? So it's a complex question. There is a desire within people to want to belong to a larger group. And that larger group is one that one imagines as being part of. So let's look at the way in which Pakistan was formed. There's this elite in in UP, in India, which feels that they don't really belong there. They belong to a country which has yet to be formed. It's not clear where that country is. Is it on the east of the UP or the west of UP? But they have to go there, right, because the likes of them will be there. Right. And the likes of them mean those who belong to the same religion. Okay, now here comes the complication. There were already well-formed nations prior to Sir Syed Ahmad Khan and Allama Iqbal and Muhammad Ali Jinnah conceiving of Pakistan. Remember that there was no such thing as Pakistan until just 75 years ago. Right. And yet Muslims had been living on this subcontinent for, well, more than 1300 years, ever since 712. Right. And so where did this suddenly come up from? There is a feeling of uncertainty. People are searching for their roots, which is why a lot of them would like to be identified with the Arabs. Right. Some would like to be identified with Turks. Right. Some would just like to be who they are, people of the soil. And this particularly for those who say we are not part of Arab culture, we're not part of Turkish culture, and there are big parts of Pakistan which see no connection with that. What would you say about Gilgit-Baltistan? This is the search for national identity that Pakistanis it's this which makes Pakistanis uncertain about themselves.
I was just wondering whether this is more a problem, if you will, of the Muslims of India, particularly from the north of India. Because I would imagine a Bengali Muslim has no problem about the identity. I mean, in the sense of, I am a Bengali, he would say, or that's it. Most of the non-Muslim Indians, most of the Hindus don't have a problem of belonging to anything else but the Al-Hind. This is I am a Hindustani or Bharati or an Indian, right? It is the Muslims who came in a way in the north as invaders who seem to definitely want to differentiate between themselves and the local population. So to them, it's like what you were saying, that a certain part of the northern Indians, whether they're from Punjab or Majars, would like to be, they originally belonged to being Turkish, Afghani, Irani, Arab. My own family, my mother's side, we are Bangash. So we are Pathan from Koharts, from my mother's side. And we have a history which was, so, I mean, we are part of this. My father's side claims to be that I am a Sayyid, I am a Shah. So my father's side of the family says we actually migrated from the Arab Peninsula, right? And so there is just this feeling, in fact, in my family used to be that the Sayyids must marry amongst the Sayyids. It was like as if you took your Sayyidship to be very pure, right? And that if you had a non-Sayyid, you'll have a problem. So this must come from a feeling that I don't want to be an Indian, let's say before 14th August 1947. We were all, or my parents and your parents were all Indians. That was their identity, right? And yet we created the overriding other identities.
That's right. The overriding other identity is a Pakistani Muslim identity. And this is what Mr. Jinnah insisted upon. He said the rest are just the angularities. Over time they will get ironed out. We will recognize each other as being
just Muslims,
just Pakistanis. And the primary condition for that is to be Muslim. Yes, of course, there'll also be Hindus and Christians, but the primary identity will be this. Now, the problem with that has been a kind of a national schizophrenia. So, the fact that local identities have been roughshod, that they have been steamrollered, has meant that there's been a lot of unhappiness. Mm-hmm. If you tell a Sindhi that you are nothing but, well, an extension of Muhammad bin Qasim, he'll say that this is a civilization that goes back to Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, and it's the Indus Valley civilization which is far more ancient than Islam itself. And if you talk about the Baloch, where did they come from? They will tell you that we were always over there. Mehergarh was much older than Islam as well, and similarly for Gilgit-Baltistan. Now it's primarily in Punjab where you find the urge to have a Muslim identity, and where you find a lot of Sayyids and people claiming to be Sayyids. This is really the problem that Pakistan immediately encounters, or the leaders of Pakistan encountered when they try to enforce a national identity upon Pakistan, instead of this being something organic and something left for the people to work out for themselves.
So the issue of identity then in case of the Pakistani is that first, of course, it's a very new identity which not everybody immediately can accept as their primary identity. So we are Sindhis and Pathans and Punjabis and Mahajers and Gilgit-Baltistani and Kashmiris. But Pakistan is still a new thing that we are grappling with. So when you say I'm a Pakistani, but what am I? Are you referring then in the end to that this is still, Pakistan is still not gelled as a nation, like an Italian, you said, or like even an Indian or Bangladeshi, that they know that they meet a Bangladeshi anywhere in the world and there'll be a Bangladeshi connection to it. But when a Pakistani meets a Pakistani somewhere, is there an automatic connection even though I may be a Sindhi Pakistani meeting a Punjabi Pakistani?
Well, the fact is that that's not true. You see, for example, in the United States, that Punjabi Pakistanis and Sindhi Pakistanis and Baloch Pakistanis, they tend to remain in separate groups. And so the overarching identity has yet to be formed. I'm not saying that it will never be formed, but people are not willing to say that just because the state of Pakistan was formed in 1947, that we are willing to forego all our rich cultural history, that we're willing to sacrifice our language at the altar of uniformity, that we must accept Urdu in place of Balochi or Sindhi or Sheena or whatever. And so the fact that the Pakistani state has been unable to accept diversity and pluralism has led to this cultural schizophrenia and this desire to look outside of Pakistan for our roots. Right. To give you an example, there is this famous drama series which was made hugely popular thanks to Imran Khan, Artakal Ghazi, which ran into well over 100 episodes. And in this, it's men on horseback with swords who fight the Christians, those who are not Muslims, and they conquer, and the glorification is that of war and so forth. And the official Pakistani line is that you must glorify these people because they are Muslims and our heritage goes back to them, which is why you have this enormous popularity. You have a statue of Ertugrul mounted on a horse with a sword in his hand, put in a public park, and other ridiculous things like that. So instead of searching for our national heroes, instead of searching for heroes who emerged from this soil, let's say fighting against the British, we look for outsiders who have come and conquered us. Right. This is quite paradoxical, actually. You would think that one would want to fight invaders. Right. Here, we celebrate the invaders.
Right. I mean, there's some of us, I mean, I'm sure may have a Turkish blood, but a very tiny fraction. You call this actually, I mean, you refer to Ertugrul, but there is the Arab wannabe syndrome you talk about, where one irritated Pakistani, and I'm quoting you, has called Pakistan's desire to seek Arab roots by emulating Arab culture its Arab wannabe syndrome. And he defines this affliction to be an uncontrollable urge to pretend to be or to behave like an Arab, when in fact the patient is not an Arab. Well, I mean, this is would actually be very sad if it was not so funny.
It is sad. We've given up our national dress, women have, in favor of the abaya. The shalwar kameez was, to my mind, far more graceful than this gown that the Arabs wear. We have fortunately very few people who wear that jubba and the ring around the head, although one does see them occasionally on the streets. What we saw was something actually quite amazing. We had Al-Pakistan number plates on cars in Lahore. I didn't ever see them in Karachi, but you do see them in Punjab. And it's not just Punjab, it's Al-Punjab. So
yeah,
this is
can be very, very ridiculous. We need to somehow, you know, I have to say this, that because my wife and I have lived for long years outside Pakistan, that, for instance, my first trip outside was 1974. I was sent on training to Beirut. And I thought I was going to, in a way, to meet my Arab brothers. And I arrived there and I find I'm a young man of 24, 25, totally alien in the Lebanese culture. So the people I naturally seek are the co-trainees from India. Because I said, and northern India, I have to say, because we're speaking the same language, eating the same food, having the same sense of humor. And so this happens to Pakistani and Indians invariably, that when they meet outside the subcontinent, they find they have tremendous amount of commonality relative to any other nationality. So in one word, who can we be closer to than Indians, actually? And at a time when, hopefully it will come in our time, when if Indians and Pakistanis truly become a friendly nations, we will rediscover this commonality as a nation as a whole.
Absolutely. But of course, you're referring to North India.
Yes.
Between North and South in India, there is a cultural barrier which has yet to be surmounted. Yeah. But the Indian state did not insist that they be one.
That's right.
It was far more tolerant of diversity and recognized the fact that Indians are, to be an Indian, you only need to be somebody from the soil.
Right.
They do not look to the outside. Now, of course, the problem in India is that the Muslims there under Hindutva rule are being considered as outsiders, when in fact they have been there for centuries. Maybe 1,000 years. Now, it's ridiculous to consider somebody who's been there, whose lineage can be extended backwards by 1,000 years, to be an outsider. That's absurd. But it's absurd for Pakistanis to look towards Central Asia, towards Uzbekistan, towards Turkmenistan, towards Iran, towards Saudi Arabia as the source of our heritage, of our parentage. And so this is what conflicts Pakistan. If we were to say, hey, anyone in this border who has grown up over there, or whose parents have and ancestors have been there, is automatically a Pakistani,
right,
and is to be considered just as good whether he is from Sindh or Balochistan or up in Gilgit or Swat.
So, I mean, you're basically, in some ways, you've already very well sort of identified that the Punjabi and the Mahajar Pakistanis seem to be far more confused in that way, or seem to be more allergic to owning themselves as belonging in a way really to the subcontinent. They look for, not all Pakistanis do it, like you very well pointed out. The Sindhis, Balochis, Gilgit-Baltistanis, they're very comfortable with who they are.
But the Punjabis are not.
They are not. And Mahajars, and some of them, and I would say the Mahajars are not either.
Well, at least the Mahajars haven't given up their language. The Punjabis have. They won't teach their children Punjabi. They won't, they refuse to have Punjabi written or taught in schools. And yet they're the biggest, the most powerful ethnic group in Pakistan. And they have, or rather a majority of them have been convinced into believing that Punjabi is an inferior language, when in fact, if you look on the other side of the border, the Indian side, you see that Punjabi, the language, is celebrated, it's spoken on television, people use it, it's taught in schools, and they're proud of it. So why this feeling of inferiority of Punjabis in Pakistan? I think I know the answer about that, for that. Because Punjab was partitioned. It was a very, very bloody partition. And then the question would come up, what the heck was that for? If we are the same people, then, let's be friendly again. So here the effort is made by the Punjabi establishment to prevent their children from being fluent in Punjabi, lest some time come when they can freely communicate with Punjabis on the other side of the border. And instead, the hope is that Punjabis will, all generations to come, will seek their identity in Islam, not in the fact that they are from the soil of Punjab.
But though I'm happy to report that I think I see a revival of pride in Punjabi culture and language from my Punjabi relatives and Punjabi friends. I see that they exactly are saying, why did we do this to our language and our culture? Because, I mean, Punjabi is a very old language and an extremely expressive, pithy language, actually. They express themselves very well. Particularly when it comes to humor. I mean, they have great one-liners. So I think there is some kind of a revival, and I hope that that will continue. But so let's say, how is a national identity formed? I mean, it will. I'll throw a hypothesis at you that I was born in 1949, so 2 years after Pakistan. So my age is roughly that of Pakistan. And in my 73 years, what I have noticed is that there is developing a nascent Pakistani identity and unity. That I do notice that when I went to school, it was a far more distinct dimension between you are a Mahajir, I'm a Punjabi. It's blurring a little amongst the newer generation. That the Urdu language, somehow, which is not spoken anywhere in any of the what constitutes Pakistan, is a uniting factor because everybody does speak it now and communicates in Urdu. So I'm just throwing that there, I am beginning to notice that there is beginning to be a Pakistani identity.
Exactly. I make the point that, I make precisely that point in the book, that in time to come, there could emerge a Pakistani identity that then supersedes, not supersedes, but which accommodates the regional identities as well. So, an overarching identity. Well, look, we don't have to have one identity.
That's
only
right.
We can have multiple identities. Every sociologist, anthropologist knows that. Why does that happen? Well, whenever people live together in certain geographical confines and share the same set of experiences. Okay, what are those experiences? Well, we are all barraged by the same nonsensical TV. Yeah. We read the same newspapers. We see the same tamashas on the national scene. We are also subject to the same kind of books in school and so forth. So whether you like it or not, over time we develop a commonality. Think of people living in a hostel.
Yeah.
So over time, there is now the emergence of a hostel identity. Like, I belong to hostel number 10, you come from hostel number 7. And so that is what then makes the difference.
Yeah, that's very well said and taken. I think it expresses also the Pakistan identity seems to be expressing in certainly expresses in our love for cricket. It unites us across. It certainly expresses ourselves in music, where not just the Urdu music, any of the other local language music also is popular across linguistic lines. So there is beginning to be a certain, I think, which is a very healthy
Yes, but it could have been much better. You see, imagine that the state patronized Sindhi music or Balochi or Baloch music or that from
be so richer.
KPK. The country would be so much richer. What if we had programs and dramas televised nationally on PTV, on private channels?
In their language, with the subtitle if you wanted, or in other languages.
Yes, and imagine the nation building that would come from people being encouraged to learn other languages, Pakistani languages. Now, if I was, and it can be done so easily digitally. Now we know that we have language learning programs like Babbel or Babel. And just with a little bit of effort, the state could do a translation effort, it could use modern technology, and it could build up a Pakistani identity very soon. But they don't do that because they're still insistent that we haven't moved away from the two-nation theory.
Two-nation theory, that's right. We're still insistent on ramming down a unitary, top-down kind of a identity when it should be bottoms-up, sort of a melting pot type of a situation, celebrating our diversity and our different cultures and languages and all that.
Absolutely.
Right. Now, there are a certain number of older countries like India, China, Japan, Iran, Egypt, which are called civilizational countries or civilizational cultures. Now, which are clearly a newer country like Pakistan is not. This is what we have been discussing, that because we are not a civilizational culture or country yet, we should allow a natural development and evolution for that to happen, right? So then we begin to see that there are commonalities in the Pakistani culture itself. In its diversity, there is some unity.
Absolutely, and this is something that is inevitable. It will come with time, but it will come only if we manage to stay together and if we learn to respect each other, which means that we give due space to all the different languages and cultures that make up Pakistan. Unfortunately, we have been dominated to a large extent by Punjab, and there is resentment in Pakistan across the board. Of course, people make the argument, oh, we've had a Sindhi Prime Minister, we've had people in government who are from every part of the country. But no, in terms of culture, in terms of education, that education which was federally determined was with a very specific purpose. It was to create a nation where there would be no provinces, where all would be thinking in that narrow straitjacket. Yes. And it's created resentment.
Yeah, that sounds like the novel 1984, the doublespeak and thing. I mean, trying to create a sort of a force down. You know, you refer to multiple identities and you know, I sent you something privately and on multiple identities, because I have just personally thought a lot about this personally for me, and I sent you something, and you were terribly kind to include it in your book. So
don't say something, it was a poem. And would you please read it out, because I think it goes so well with this chapter that I felt that it would be such a superb addition to it.
Okay, well, I will do that. Thank you very much for giving me the honor to anyway have included in your book. But this is how it goes. I am the universe. I am the Milky Way galaxy. I am the earth. I am the flora and fauna. I'm a Homo sapien. I'm a global citizen. I'm an Asian. I'm a South Asian. I'm a Pakistani. I'm a Sunni, Shia, Ahmadi, Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, Parsi, atheist. I'm a man, woman, transgender. I'm a son, daughter, brother, sister, father, mother, friend. I'm all of above and none of above.
In the true Sufi spirit, in the spirit of Zen.
Thank you. So in a nutshell, Dr. Saab, we must accept our sort of principal identity being multiple and different, and be comfortable in our skin about it. So when we say, I'm a Pakistani, then hopefully one day we will don't have to say, but what am I? We will just say, I'm a Pakistani.
I would go beyond that. I would say that someday, hopefully not too far in the future, we will be able to say that I belong to this region, I belong to South Asia, then I belong to all of Asia, and then I belong to the entire globe, because fundamentally we come from one mother, a mother who was in Africa. It was the migration out of Africa, something like 70,000 years ago, that populated the earth, and we all have identical DNA.
Right.
We know that today. We know that, and we can manipulate it. We can, I mean, for medical treatment and so forth, there's no dispute about how similar we are, and that the differences were entirely because of different climates, because of different local conditions. But in terms of a fundamental humanity, we are just the same. And so I do wish that at some point we understand that respecting each other and adhering to what I think is the greatest document that has been produced by humankind, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we are able to supersede nationalism, because nationalism and religion divide us. Our common humanity unites us.
Well, folks, on that sort of overarching, inspiring and touching vision that Dr. Pervez Hoodbhoy sort of said, that's a great place to end our fifth big question he asked. I'm a Pakistani, but what am I? We will be with you with our last and part 5 of this book in the next episode. Be well and take care.